series on same. And the idea is that, we want to illustrate that we are going through the same pain, the same struggles, but ultimately we serve the same God. And I believe that is very encouraging. So last time we spoke about selfishness and pride and how it can derail our desire for unity, basically. And Jesus addressed the selfishness and the self-centeredness of the disciples, and just how it could be a threat to their unity afterwards as well. But before we jump in for tonight, I want us to do this mini activity. I want us to write our own 5 versions of our own I am statements. Yes. So write down 5 of your own 5 I am statements. I hope I make sense by that. So I'll give an example. This is obviously relating to me. I am a student. I am a disciple. I am male. I am South African. So something like that, something that you identify with. So I'll give you guys maybe a minute or so to just write those things down. And then, we can open it up for a time of sharing and feedback as to what you guys have there. So let's do that. You guys done? I think I gave you guys enough time. Eh? I think so. You guys are still busy. All right. Let's give it 10 more seconds then. Okay, I like to believe that by now everyone is done. Okay. So let's open it up for a time of feedback, sharing. What do you guys have there? Feel free to unmute yourself and obviously share.
Hello?
I'm not sure I know who's. Okay, go ahead.
Network is a bit weird. Okay. Okay. I hope I don't know. It keeps going in and out, but cool. Can you hear me or should I just type this?
No, I hear you. And for anyone who wants to type in the chat box, you're welcome to do so as well.
Okay, hi, I'm Tando. I am a disciple of Jesus. I'm a woman. I'm a family girl. I am a McDonald's fries lover, and I am shorter than I think.
Okay. That's fair. All right. Anyone else?
I can go.
Go for it.
Cool. So I am God's daughter. I am strong. I am beautiful. I am awesome. And I am worthy.
Okay. We can't argue with that. Anyone else?
Mike, I can go.
Sure.
Awesome. So my 5 that I wrote was: I am worthy, I am talented, I'm hardworking, I'm curious, and I'm compassionate.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Again, I can argue. Maybe let's take a couple more.
I can go.
Go for it.
So my 5 are: I am determined, I am quiet, I am reserved, I am fine, and I am unique.
All right. All right. Beautiful stuff. Unique. Okay. Can we take the last one?
I can go. I'm inquisitive. I'm a future SLP. I am hilarious. I am melodramatic. I am a person who loves deeply.
Okay. That's deep stuff right there. But thank you all guys for sharing. I'm not going to argue with your assessments. What is clear from what you guys said, it's clear that you guys have a lot of self-love and you love yourselves, you appreciate yourself. That's good. That's good. But I want you to just, remember your I am statements and just keep that list close to you as you continue. Just have them close to you. But for tonight, what we're going to focus on is the idea of selflessness, the idea of servanthood. That's what we'll be talking about tonight. And we'll be reading from Mark 10, verse 35 to 25. Can I have any volunteers to read that for us, please?
I got you, fam. Just give me the scripture again.
Mark 10, verse 35 to 45.
All right, cool.
Sure.
Can I start reading like now?
Yeah, you can go for it.
Okay. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink with the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Beautiful. Thanks, Light. So yeah, I know that some of this, we read it before and then you guys already know what happened. So yeah, this is basically Jesus addressing the selfishness, again, the self-centeredness, and how it was a threat to the unity of the disciples and later the apostles. So, but for tonight, I want us to focus more on verse 42 to 45. And here, basically, we see Jesus being countercultural. As we look at verse 42, the Gentile leaders dominate, they dominate the servants, basically. These men of high positions, they exercise their power over the servants, right? And I think it's interesting to note that this is how the world operates as well, right? We live in a world that is concerned about status, about prestige, about the fame, about the glory, the fortune. We are concerned about being the most important person in society, in communities, right? This is the world that we live in. And, we live in a world as well where when you think of serve or saving, I don't know about you, but for me, I think this is something that is for the poor. I think that's something for the weak, or even for the unwise, whatever that is. And funny enough, Jesus knew this when he actually said these things to the disciples. Like he knew that. And thus, by saying this, I believe that he's demonstrating, again, his counterculturalness. The fact that he didn't come to conform to the world, but to bring his glory and his kingdom to this world, to show us the way of living, which was obviously foreign at the time. And so, these comments in verse 42, they're coming from on the back of what James and John, okay, before I continue, I usually say James when I'm referring to James. I've made this habit. It is difficult for me. When I see James, I just say James. So just remember, when I say James or when I say James, I'm referring to James. I'm just putting it out there because from now on, I'll be saying James probably. But anyways, so those comments that are said in verse 42, they're coming back from what basically James and James said, right? Or rather, and John said. And so this is something that didn't please the other disciples. We know this. These people, they didn't understand what Jesus was talking about, the kingdom that he was talking about. James and John didn't understand the cup or the baptism that Jesus was talking about. They had their minds firmly placed on, being exalted in society, on being the, typical rulers like the Gentiles, basically. And I think we're all in grave danger of being like that as well. I think we can also think of ourselves as being, dominant, or as being people who are deserving of being served, right? I think we can also do that. We can also think of ourselves as being more important than other people. And, as I was actually preparing this, I came over this phrase. I think it's "lord it over." Now, many of you may know what that means, like exactly what it means. But for me, I knew and understood this through the context it was said, not necessarily what it meant word for word or its exact meaning or definition. And after some thorough research, what I came to realize, and the feedback basically, is that "lord it over" means to act in a way that shows one thinks one is better or more important than someone. And what is interesting is that Jesus saw this in his disciples. This is the character trait that he saw in his disciples, the very same people who actually, we have to represent him more than better than anyone else. But he saw this quality in there. And I think that's very interesting. It's also interesting because we know that Jesus didn't want that for his disciples. So what did Jesus want, right? That is the question. So, Jesus, we know, again, he didn't want that, but he proposed a different idea that was not only foreign at the time, it's still foreign today, if you think about it. Jesus is imploring his disciples to actually change their minds and their way of thinking about the kingdom, about the role of leaders, basically. That the leaders in society and let's say spiritual leaders, those are two different things. And it's not about the glory or the status or the fame if you want to actually serve God, right? And I imagine as he said these things, for the disciples, this must have been bad news. Like, it must have been like, what is this guy saying? Because for them, it must have been like, I'm saving the Lord. I'm saving the God who actually took Israel out of Egypt, and I want people to know me. And I'm sure people are going to respect us. People are going to serve us, right? And Jesus listened to those things. So I'm sure he knew those things. And it's like, no, nah, chief, that's not what I'm saying. You see, those things that you want the people to do for you, those are the exact same things that you have to do for them if you are to be leaders or to be great in my kingdom. And how radical is that? How radical was that at the time, and how radical is this today? And I think that's just breathtaking, basically. And so Jesus was proposing to his disciples that the way of greatness is the way of service. That's basically what Jesus was saying to his disciples. And I understand. And I understand that serving is something that doesn't come natural to us. It's not normal, right? We are all inherently we have these desires of being valued, of being exalted in communities, of feeling like we need to be served. That's just how we are, right? But I want us to actually adopt the mindset of a servant, to have an attitude of a servant. That's what I'm challenging you guys to have tonight. And as servant, what does this mean? What does this mean when I say that this attitude of a servant? I mean that when you do this kind deeds, or when you have this, when you do this acts of service, I'm saying that, we shouldn't expect a reward. We shouldn't expect to be complimented. We shouldn't expect, someone to buy you something or a pay raise or anything of the kind. I'm merely saying that, if we are servants and if we have this attitude of a servant, what we have to say is just to, merely say, I have only done my duty. That is the mindset of a servant. And that's how we need to approach this, right? And so as I looked at verse 43 and 44, two words come to mind. And, it's slave and servant again. This are strong words, right? But Jesus wants us to be servants and slaves to one another. This is clear that this is what Jesus wants of us as his disciples. And again, like I said, these are strong words, especially in today's world. They carry heavy connotations. When you think about these words, you're like, yeah, this is deep, right? Servant and slave. But what I've as I realize these things, what I've come to realize, and the conclusion I've come to is that Jesus is saying to us that we shouldn't be selfish in our ambitions. He wants us to consider other people's needs to be more important than our own. I'll repeat that. Jesus wants us to actually consider other people's needs to be more important than our own, right? And I know it's difficult. I know it's not an easy thing to do. And I have a question for you tonight. When was the last time you actually served without being asked? Right? You don't have to answer that now, but just think about that for yourself. And we must consistently and constantly look for opportunities to serve. There are plenty of opportunities for us to actually serve. And as we look at verse 45, I'll just read again. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So this is the example, right? This is the standard. This is the God that we are following, a God who was willing to lay down his life for us, a God who wanted to serve and actually not be served. This is the ultimate example. It doesn't get any higher than that. And we see it being clearly illustrated in verse 45. And so, for Jesus to come to earth, this was the supreme act of humble servanthood. And we must imitate him. If we're thinking about what this means for us, well, we must imitate him in his selfless example every day in our everyday lives. That is what we need to do, right? And so I'll share my own kind of story and my own illustration that will show you that we're all in grave danger of actually being people who actually want to be saved, of pursuing the worldly things basically. And I know that growing up, I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I know that this doesn't come as a surprise for many of you, but yes, I just wanted to be a professional soccer player, and for as long as I can remember. But I remember the 2010 World Cup. Yeah, that was kind of the full stop. That was like, this is it. This is my dream. This is what I want for my life. I want nothing else. Man, I was passionate about this. I love the game. I still do. But I was relentless back then in my pursuit of this dream. I wanted nothing more than that. But once I started studying the Bible, right? Once I started studying the Bible in 2018 and 2019, I realized my let's call them hidden motives for actually pursuing this dream. I realized that I also wanted the fame. I wanted the glory. I wanted the, I wanted the prestige, the worldly definition of success, the fortune. I wanted the respect of everybody. And it's funny that when I say respect of everybody, I think back to what this well-known basketball player said last year, LeBron James. I'm sure most of you guys know him. And interestingly enough, he plays for the LA Lakers, and we know they won the NBA championship last year. So, in his post-match interview, I was listening to it, and it's quite interesting what he said. So he said, the LA Lakers family organization, we want our respect. And he concluded by saying, I want my respect. So I'm not trying to throw shade at this great sportsman. Listen, I admire the guy. I admire his craft. I like him a lot. But what I'm trying to show you is this is how the world is, right? This is how the world is. We live in a world that actually wants to be, we want to be served, but we're not willing to actually serve ourselves. And we're all in grave danger, actually, of being in that position. And so, like I said earlier on, as I started studying the Bible, with great men like E.D.G.E, Chico, and Remo, they showed me an alternative perspective. They showed me an alternative view that I soon realized that actually this is the only view. This is the only perspective. We are called to be servants. We are called to serve. We are called to actually carry each other's burdens and to constantly look for opportunities, to serve and to do so without growing weary. That is what we're called to do, right? And I want us to actually go to basically Romans 1 verse 1, but you don't have to go there. Just keep in mind these passages that I'm kind of calling out. Romans 1 verse 1, 2 Peter 1 verse 1, and James 1 verse 1. And it is very interesting, what these guys say as they introduce themselves. And when they introduce themselves, they say there's a common word that they use basically. And depending on your version, others say bond servant, and another one says servant, right? This is how they identified themselves. This is how they actually, introduce themselves to churches and to people, right? And these are some of the heaviest hitters of the New Testament. But they actually thought to themselves, no, as I address myself, I will be called a servant. James is the blood brother of Jesus. Like he knows Jesus. And I don't know about you, but if I was in his position or in his shoes, man, I would make sure that everyone knew that Jesus is my blood brother. So in everything, in wherever I go, I would introduce myself, as Michael, the blood brother of Jesus. I would use that. And I think, but that's not what he did, right? He actually thought to himself, no, by me saying servant, this is actually more pertinent. This shows us that this man knew what he was called to do. These apostles, James, Peter, and Paul, they understood what Jesus did for them. They grasped it, right? And so right now, before we continue, I want us to actually look at our own 5 I am statements. And I want you to tell me if you have 7 as part of that I am statement. Right? And remember that psychologists believe that our I am statements, they represent who we view ourselves, who we think of ourselves. That's what we think we are. Right? And you said some beautiful stuff. You all shared some beautiful stuff. Right? But there is no 7 there. Right? And so imagine now if we actually embrace this idea of being servants as a campus ministry, what would happen? Imagine if we become known as a people who are known for being servants. Imagine if we have the word servant or born servant, to be a part of our DNA, to be a part of our identity. Imagine how that would look like. And that's something that I want to be a part of. And so, that's something that we should look at into our lives. And am I a servant? Do I have the attitude of a servant? Right now, just before I hand over to Abby, above all else, I just want us to remember that we're doing all these things. We're not doing them for men or to please other people. We're doing it for God. That's something that I want us to all remember. That you don't want to be exalted. You don't want to be praised by this guy or that guy as we do these things. You're doing it for God and for the love that he showed for us, that we have to in turn show to all of us as a community. So right now, I'll just hand over to Abby and she'll share, her stunning observations.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for sharing and convicting us with Jesus's words. But yeah, this passage it hits hard. And I think that's it's one of the things that I absolutely love and adore about Jesus is the fact that he doesn't beat around the bush when it comes to the standard that we need to be living our lives by. He's always very direct, sometimes to the point that it cuts out hard, but I think that's necessary. And so I'm just gonna share some things that really stood out to me about this passage. And I think the first thing is in verse 42, where it says, Jesus called them together. And I know that this is meant fairly literally, that he physically called the disciples together to speak to them. But I think in essence, on a deeper level, this is still true for us today. Jesus calls us together. He is our fundamental unifying factor. So when we talk about unity amongst God's people, we need to make sure that we as individuals start with our own relationship with Jesus first. If our lives aren't individually lived with and for Jesus, we cannot collectively be called together by him and then hope to meet that call. And so this reminds me of Philippians 2 verse 1 and 2, and you don't need to turn there, I'll just read it for you guys. It says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in his spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. And so essentially our want and need for spiritual unity and servanthood essentially can only come from our own relationship with Jesus. So because of the love, the compassion, the unity, the relationship that I have experienced with Jesus, I'm able to share that with God's people. I'm able to share, I'm able to share that love, and then I'm able to actually live up to the standard of unity that God has called us to. And so essentially for myself, and I think for all of us, we need to remind ourselves to begin with Jesus, go back to the root, the core of it all, which is your own relationship with Jesus, and start there. And so I think something else that really hit me, and something that Michael spoke about, and Mike, thank you so much for sharing your own personal experience with, and your struggle with selfish ambition, because that's definitely something that I've struggled with too. But it's kind of this concept of status versus servanthood and what we value most. And in our society, as we've spoken about, we definitely value status a lot more than we value servanthood or being a servant. And we've generally spoken about kind of equalizing the playing field. So having this mindset that different roles hold the same value, even though they're in different positions. But Jesus isn't even talking about equality here. He's saying that very clearly servanthood needs to be of much higher value in our lives than status. And so personally, in my life, again, like I've shared, I struggle still with this concept of selfish ambition. I want to be the best in what I do. I want people to praise me. I want people to look up to me. I want the status, the fame, and the fortune, all those things. But more than this, I've wanted to be liked. And I've realized that status is definitely something that we define for ourselves, just as much as it is the fame, the fortune, the worldly success. And believe me, those things are struggles, and they're important to focus on and be aware of so that we can fight them, and they can easily become our gods and our idols. But just as much as those are dangerous, the seek and the want for approval from others can be just as dangerous. The fact that I'm striving after intellect or knowledge or like approval from my relationships or value in my relationships, those things can be just as dangerous, because that's what I've defined status to be for myself. And so ultimately, if I value anything more, so anything that I think could bring me like personal capital or personal status, if I value that more than I value servanthood, period, like just servanthood as a concept, there is literally no chance for unity to be amongst me and other people. There is no chance, because I will always consider myself to be better. And so personally, I've often intentionally avoided friendships with certain people because I felt as though that they couldn't bring anything of value to my life. On the flip side, I would treat all my relationships as networking opportunities. So I'd only present the good parts of myself so that I could win approval or ultimately gain opportunities or praise or status from the relationships. I would also just refuse to accept critique or advice from people I didn't consider to be wise enough to give me the critique or advice. And the thing is, in all of those things, it was just rooted in this immense sense of entitlement and pride, because I was valuing my personal capital, my personal status, more than literally anything else in my life. That was my God, that was my priority. And the thing is, I didn't understand, and sometimes we don't understand, that in God's eyes, these things that we think bring us status or value, they're garbage, they're trash in God's eyes. And the only thing that is truly of value is a serving, humble heart. And so, again, Jesus doesn't beat around the bush when he says this stuff, it hits. And specifically in verse 44, when he says we need to be a slave to all, that that's a high calling, because I think it's easy for us to be a slave, I guess, in quotation marks, or to serve people that we respect, or to serve people that we like, or to serve people who have served us. But Jesus doesn't say that. He doesn't say, serve those who served you, or be a slave to those you respect, or be a slave to the people you like. It's be a slave to all, no matter what. And again, it's an insanely high calling, but we often lose the why behind this. And Michael definitely spoke about this, but Jesus then literally after that goes on to give us the why. And he says, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give us his life as a ransom for many. And so essentially in verse 42, Jesus calls us together. He calls us to servanthood throughout the passage. He calls us to be a slave, but he doesn't just call us to this high standard and then leave us to figure it out. He's not just be a slave. He doesn't just say be a slave and then bounce. He says, be a slave, be a servant. And then he sets the greatest example of all on how to do this. So essentially, when in doubt, we need to look at Jesus's sacrifice. So we need to remember that we need to be a slave, not because it's the right thing to do or because we can get something out of it, but because our master was the slave first. And so essentially, this is all well and good to talk about and meditate on. And I really encourage you guys to go read the scripture again and just think about it, meditate on it, go through it in your own time. But how do we do this? How do we actually do this? What are some practicals? And Mike's also going to share some of the practicals that have helped him. But I'm just going to share some things that have really helped me to kind of bring this down to attainable things. Because I think, again, the scripture doesn't necessarily mean that I now have to literally go and die to be a servant. It's other things. So let's talk about that. So I think some things that have helped me, or it's just a big practical, is to ask. And so an example of that is if we have, movie night at the Genesis house, like on Friday nights, or we step into someone's home for a Sunday service, it's a thing of going up to the host or going up to someone you know is helping out and being like, hey, how can I help? What can I do? It's a thing of before services or before Frisbee or things like that. It's a thing of who needs a lift? Who can I help out? What can I give? What are the resources that I have and what can I do? That also extends to your personal life, on an introspective level. We need to be able to ask the people around us, how can we grow in our servanthood? You can just ask yourself that. And I think if you truly are honest with yourself, you'll be able to get a lot of answers out of that little time with yourself. And so it's a thing of ask yourself, where can I actually grow? Where am I not truly being a servant? Asking the people you trust and the people you think really embody that serving heart of Christ, to ask them, how do you serve? What are the things that motivate you? What has helped you to be a true servant? And then ultimately at the root of it, I also think, ask God. We need to pray about this. We can only do this, like I said previously, because of our relationship with God. If I'm going to try and do this by my own strength, it's just going to be for my own glory, and it's going to be useless at the end. And so true spiritual unity only comes from God. And so ask God to help you show where to serve, give you opportunities to serve. Just ask him for the help to do that. And then just a little thing on that, when you've asked, when you've gotten an answer, do it. So when you go up to a place and you ask someone, hey, how can I help? And they say, please wash the dishes. Actually wash the dishes. Don't think I'm above this. No, I was thinking maybe I can do this thing instead. We should never think that we're above any means of serving, because Jesus didn't think that he was above dying for us, even though he 100% was. And so I hope some of that helped. I hope some of it hit any of you guys. And I think this is definitely something that we do together. So lean on one another, ask one another, challenge one another, definitely do that. But this has been an honor to be able to share. And I'm going to hand back over to Mike just to close us out.
Thanks, Abby. That was great. That was great. Thanks for your openness, your vulnerability. Thank you. So just to continue on what Ed was saying, as to what this means for us. Often we view this whole idea of serving as being, this grandiose or grand or this big thing, but it's often the smallest of things that make the difference. So it's often making a meal probably for a friend who is going through some stuff. It's praying for someone and actually informing them that you've prayed for them. Maybe even going on a fast together. Those are some of the things that one can do. But what about a social setting? and I'll speak for myself. When I go to a social setting or a campus event, I'm usually observant of my surroundings. I overanalyze my environment, basically. And when I do that, more often than not, I always see an individual, not the same person, fortunately, but an individual who may be, struggling to actually integrate, who you can see that this person is struggling to actually fit in, or they may look somewhat estranged to the group. And I know that I'm not the only one who actually sees these things. I'm not the only one who notices these things. So how about we now, we change that and we actually go to that person and to actually introduce ourselves and just to have a genuine desire and interest in knowing this person, to show that here I am and I want to know you, and I know that we are different people and we have different personalities. And sometimes we feel like, okay, this guy or this, sister or whatever, he or she was, is intimidating or, is different to you, whatever the case may be. How about you give yourself the time to actually understand their different worldview, just how different they are. You give yourself the time to actually understand them, understand how they are, why they are that way, that different to you, of course, and that way we can actually make everyone feel special, to feel appreciated, because we are special and we need to all be appreciated and valued, especially in God's kingdom, and lastly, I just want us to go back to the to the standard, to the ultimate example, which is Jesus Christ, and let us look at his mindset. When Jesus walked into a room or into that kind of social setting, you can clearly see that his mindset was, how can I serve, and not the opposite, right? And so let us then step out of our comfort zone, because there's no growth in it, right? And let us actually challenge ourselves and actually be there for each other and actually serve one another and actually carry each other's burdens, right? And I just want to close off by just saying this. Can you imagine if all of us actually adopt this, if all of us can actually have this mindset, take hold of what we're saying, to actually take this thing seriously? Can you imagine what that would mean for the campus ministry? Like what that would mean for us, how it would look like basically for us. Can you imagine how that would be? And man, that's a world that I want to be a part of. And I think we can all do that, right? Because ultimately in the end, we have the same struggles, the same pains, the same headaches, but more importantly, we serve the same God.